everybody, and welcome back to Brainwave. And today we're going to be checking out episode 4 of Ahsoka, the Fallen Jedi. And we're very, very close on the channel to getting up to the current amount of Ahsoka episodes that they are. They do have episode 6 out currently, so we're going to try to get the breakdowns up to episode 6, but we are closing in finally after a decent amount of time. We are finally closing in on the basically getting to the same of like basically getting up to date with the Ahsoka episodes. But don't worry, guys, those breakdowns are on the way. On top of that, 5 minutes of Freddy trailer breakdown is actually going to be coming very, very, very soon, and it's gonna be great. It's gonna be fun. But for now, let's get straight into this episode 4 of Ahsoka trailer breakdown. And this one is called Fallen Jedi. Keep that title in mind because that's going to be very, very important. But for now, we start the episode with Sabine and Hu Yang trying to repair the T6 shuttle due to the fact that it got shot by the Eye of Sion, right? And we see Sabine trying to contact Home One, which is basically her trying to contact Hera because, they can't really get off the planet, so that's what she's trying to do. But she actually mentions something very, very interesting. She mentions the code name Fulcrum. She says, "Come in, Home One. This is Fulcrum." And if you guys don't know, Fulcrum is actually the code name that Ahsoka used for the ship in Rebels, and I think even in Clone Wars. I think it was referenced a couple of times in Clone Wars. I don't really remember, but I definitely know it was in Rebels. And I just love to see how they're tying these Easter eggs in here. It is just fantastic, right? So of course, Sabine Wren does that. She has no luck. Then we see Hu Yang trying to fix some cables, and he basically says, "I might be able to rewire a transmission," right? But basically, mid conversation, Sabine realizes that Ahsoka is not with them. So she goes outside the shuttle and she finds them. And she tells her about the current situation. And Ahsoka says that the ground base isn't that far. And basically, that they can infiltrate it from the ground. So as Sabine gets the plan, she's going back up into the ship, and Ahsoka stops her, and she talks about how the enemy has the map, and they have exactly what they need to get to this place, right? And she is essentially afraid that they are going to have to make the difficult choice of destroying that map. And we know if they destroy that map, they can't find Ezra. So not only if they just they in order to just if they were to destroy the map, right? You'd have to basically leave Ezra, but you'd stop Thrawn, right? Or you can keep the map, right? Potentially get have it go into their hands. They find Ezra, but they also find Thrawn. So it's very, very, very interesting. Very, really like hard choice to make. And it really just goes to show you the kind of choices that that Ahsoka and Sabine actually have to make, and if they're on the same side or not. Because if we continue this conversation, Sabine is already trying to deny the fact that that won't happen. And let's be honest, it's going to happen. Okay. So Sabine is more concerned with Ezra. And we know that's a repeating thing on this series that Sabine feels so much regret for losing Ezra and that she really does want to find him. However, the only way that is the case is if Thrawn gets back himself. So and Ahsoka's saying that it's better to not allow Thrawn to return than for Ezra to come back. And that's just the part of the sacrifice, really. And that's why I really do love this scene, because it shows, like, do I go with my morals or do I stop the threat, right? And Ahsoka is concerned that Sabine will have to make the right one, make the right choice, right? Because she wants to find Ezra as well, but if it doesn't work, then they have no choice, right? But Sabine goes back into the ship. Hu Yang comes out saying that he can repair it. He starts repairing the ship, and in the forest, as the camera zooms out, We see an HK assassin droid looking full menacing, like Batman level menacing, and then we cut to the outpost with Sabine, or not outpost, not Sabine, with Bylon, Shin, and Morgan. Of course, Marak is also in the background, but Shin says that they know where the Jedi starship is located, and they say about a dozen clicks. And if you guys don't know, clicks is basically like the measurements, right? In Star Wars, right? It's kind of like I don't know what it actually measures out to. I think it's like meters, I want to say. But if you guys don't understand what the word clicks means, it basically just means how, like, distance wise, like how far are they, right? And Morgan says that they can go try to stop them, but the guards won't be able to hold them that long. So that's why Shin and Morok actually go to do it themselves, while Morgan and Balon actually stay at the outpost trying to get everything ready for their departure. But as Balon is talking to Morgan, Morgan senses, or like sense, I don't know if it's really sensing because she doesn't really sense it. I mean, I guess she's just assuming, right? But she senses that he has fear in his voice, right? And Bylon actually tells her that it's not fear, it's just kind of experience, right? And you may think, well, that's a weird dialogue line to say after that. Well, it's kind of not, because we know that Bylon has seen some things, right? So he's never really truly afraid, especially now that he was able to master the levels of the Force. But it just goes to show you that Bylon is kind of like predicting here is like, okay, they're here now, so whatever happens next is not going to be good, right? So it's either we win or we don't. But we cut back to Hu Yang working on the shuttle, and uh, of course, you got the HK assassin droids with their blasters basically sitting and like surrounding him like a pack of wolves here. That is terrifying. Okay. But before the battle ensues, we see Sabine Wren suiting up in her armor, and she's basically has everything unpacked on the table, including her helmet and her, of course, her iconic blasters. But it also seems like she can't find something, and she's kind of like reckless when she realizes she can't find it, right? She's got some kind of like piece that she's looking for that attaches to her blasters, right? And when she has everything laid out, she can't find it, and she basically decides to get like kind of reckless in looking for it. And Ahsoka notices this, and she's kind of like confused on what's happening because it's kind of like a weird. She realizes that she's searching for something, but while Sabine's kind of going crazy, Ahsoka finds it in 2 seconds. And I just love this because keep that in mind as well, okay? We already have the title to keep in mind, Fallen Jedi, and we have this to keep in mind. Ahsoka's more calm, while Sabine's more reckless, right? And that's, I'm assuming, because of her Mandalorian upbringing. But Ahsoka talks to Sabine, and she says that we need to do the right thing regardless of our personal feelings, obviously bringing up Ezra again, right? And she continues to mention this because she's concerned. Okay, I don't think we've ever seen Ahsoka really concerned, like when it came to like things like this, right? But it just goes to show you how much of a menace Thrawn is, because if Thrawn is to get back, it's not going to be good. Okay, overall, it's just not going to be good. And Ahsoka, although she thinks Sabine is a really strong fighter, she needs to know that she'll pick the right option, right? And it keeps bringing that up. Keep that in mind too. 3 things to keep in mind. Okay, they're gonna come up again. So trust me. But they're having that conversation. But we cut back to Hu Yang, and he is about to get jumped by HK assassin droids. And as soon as they jump him, he basically has to fight them. And I'm not going to lie, he can fight pretty well. He's actually handling his own against a droid that's designed to kill things, right? So it really just is impressive. And it goes to show you what Hu Yang can do. and he's even using his two extra arms as well, which is something to keep in mind, right? But basically, the HK assassin droid pins him down, and he's muffling the word "help," right? And more droids come in after that. Huyang continues to fight them, and they actually hit the ship, and all the electricity on the ship goes out, right? And that's the only reason that Ahsoka and Sabine know that he's in trouble, because of the fact that the lights went out. And it actually is another thing, because when Sabine says that that droid messed up, Ahsoka's like, he would never mess up, right? And that it just shows that Hu Yang's got experience as well. Another like recurring theme, right? But Ahsoka and Sabine jump out of the ship, and Sabine and Ahsoka basically destroy these HK assassin droids, and with kind of brutal combos too. If you guys notice, of course, Ahsoka is using the two lightsabers, right? And you can see how Sabine's Beskar armor is kind of tanking the shots, and we know right from the Mandalorian, we don't know if her Beskar is pure or not, but it can resist blaster fire. Um, like depending on how pure Beskar is. Like if Beskar is really pure, it will have such a resistance rate that it can block lightsabers. But if it's not, it can kind of go both ways, right? But Sabine is basically tanking these shots right now, and I love the light, like the white flashes that it has too, because these white flashes are really just like showing how strong this armor is. And then we cut back to a scene with Ahsoka stabbing this HK assassin droid almost on its neck, like through his neck. It's kind of crazy, right? But then she does something even more insane. She force pulls a HK assassin droid in front of Sabine, who is getting blasted by another HK assassin droid. So the HK assassin droid is shooting the HK assassin droid that Ahsoka pulled in front of him. And then Sabine takes this opportunity to basically choke this HK assassin droid with her grapple. Obviously, this is the Mandalorian grapple. If you guys have ever seen the Mandalorian, you know what that is, right? But she grapples him and then pulls him with the grapple, and then Ahsoka just, says, "Off with your head." I'm not going to go into depth because you know what happened. So, yeah. But it really just is a insane fight scene. I do love it. And these white lightsabers on Ahsoka really do make the scene even more entertaining as well. But we continue with the episode. They're talking, saying how the ship is even more damaged now, and they need Hu Yang to basically fix the ship to at least get some kind of transmission to Hera, right? But before they leave to go to this outpost, because directly after they get attacked, they go to the outpost because they want to stop this, right? But before they get attacked, or before they go to the outpost, right? Hu Yang makes one request of them both, and it's to not leave each other, right? And it kind of is concerning that Hu Yang, because everyone's worried about each other. Like Ahsoka is worried about Sabine Wren and her like decision making. Hu Yang is worried about them both, right? And he knows that Ahsoka is strong and that Sabine is too. But I don't know why like he's worried about them necessarily. Like I get it's his job. Like I get he actually does worry about them, but it's kind of like an awkward thing here because you don't expect him to be like fully worried about them, right? Because you have Ahsoka and you have Sabine, but maybe Hu Yang knows more about Bylon than he actually thinks. Well, that they actually know, right? And maybe he already told Ahsoka or whatever, but he's seen Bylon before, and maybe that's why he's worried. I don't really know, but I just figured I'd mention that because it's not like he's almost seems a little bit too worried, if that makes sense. But anyway, we cut back to the starships of the basically the starships of the Rebel Alliance. Hera can be seen walking with uh, J- Jason and Chopper. There we go. I was like trying to remember I was trying to remember his name, but he can see she's walking with them, right? I'm trying not to stutter, but like it's like kind of hard because I'm like trying to look at everything and make sure that I get all of it, right? But she's walking with Chopper and Jason, and you could in this scene with them walking in the hangar, there's a bunch of different ships in the background, and I just really like the attention to visual detail here. You could see the ghost in the background as well, and just a bunch of cargo and a bunch of ships in the background flying. I think there's even some like ships that really look similar to like separatist ships. I don't know if that's just me, but there's a lot of different ships in the background. It's just I love the attention to detail. But as she's walking, she gets stopped by a I don't even know if this is I think she gets stopped by a lieutenant. I don't know what kind of like level he is, but she gets stopped by a lieutenant and they start having a conversation basically saying you can't leave without authority, right? And Hera being rebellious basically is just like, yeah, sure. And then he mentions that what am I going to tell the staff, right? When they have this meeting and he's going to be and she's like just think of something, right? And his response is just fantastic, right? He says, think of something, think of something, think of something, right? And he's just like, it just really is like, man, does this happen all the time? Like, does Hera actually do this to him all the time? And he's just like, man, of course I gotta think of something, right? It's just kind of funny. But Hera and Jason are getting ready to fly. Um, and Jason actually mentions to Hera, "Why are you disobeying orders?" Right? Or like basically is like, "Can I disobey?" I think he's saying like, "Can I disobey orders?" Basically, like asking her a question, and she's like, "When you become a general, then you can do whatever you want," which is funny. Just it's overall just like a funny interaction, and I kind of love it. I'm not gonna lie, but basically they fly out and even though we thought it was just them, it turns out it's not. And we can see a squadron of X Wings following behind her. And, of course, we see the man, the myth, the legend from the Mandalorian series, Carson. We do love to see it, okay? But he makes his return, and it really just is questioning because where is Seb? Because if you guys remember in the Mandalorian series, right? We see Carson talking to Seb in one of the pilot basically outposts that they have on a different planet, right? So it's kind of weird that we see Carson but not Seb. I don't know. I just kind of found that weird. But they're talking, and he says, "You know, you're risking a lot here." And she's like, "Well, I'm a rebel, so that's how it works." That she didn't say that exactly, but he also refers to her as Phoenix Leader, which is really, really cool. Definitely another nod back there. And all of them are preparing to jump into hyperspace, and they all jump away. And then we cut back to the Eye of Sion. And it is pretty much almost done at this state. It's literally just needs all the packing, and then they're leaving, right? And of course the packing is taking the longest because of course it's the packing that takes the longest. You know how it is. If you go on vacation, okay. But we see Bylon and Morgan talking once again, and they're saying how they will need to calculate the hyperspace coordinates, right? And that if the map is off by just even a little bit, the calculations will be messed up, right? And basically they'll miss by like a lot. Because if you guys don't know, when you hyperspace, right, you have to have a destination set, right? It's kind of not like the MCU with the it's not like the MCU where the Guardians basically go through the I forgot what it's called. Neural telepathic network. No, neural teleportation network neural telepathic transport teleportation network. Yeah, neural telepathic telepathic transportation network. Right? I think it's. Hold on, I'm gonna look this up. Now I'm curious. Neural transportation tele transportation network guardians. I know this is, by the way, guys, I know this is entirely unnecessary, but I'm looking it up. I'm doing it for the culture. Universal Neural Teleportation Network. There it is. Basically, if you guys don't know, in Guardians of the Galaxy, they use the Universal Neural Teleportation Network. And basically, those are like the hyperspace hexagons, right? That you can basically go through, right? This is a little bit different. In Star Wars, it's different, right? The way it works, right, is you go into hyperspace, right? But you have to have the coordinates set, because if you don't have the coordinates set for the planet, right, and you're off by a lot, or like by a little bit, especially with the Eye of Sion, which goes basically at light, basically just goes hyperspeed all the way to another galaxy. If you're off by even a little bit, you're done. Okay, you're going not where you want to go. Okay, and in this case, if they miss, they're going to the void. So, but Morgan uses her magic again, sets the map in place, and now they have the whole spear up again, and they are calculating the route to get to Thrawn. And now we see this scene of Ahsoka and Sabine running. Now, I don't know if they're running because they think it's urgent, or maybe they don't think it's urgent. I don't even know. But they're running nonetheless, and I think it's because they want to make sure that they're not losing any time. So they're running, and they meet up with Shin and Morak. And this is just going to be a crazy, crazy showdown, because, Sabine is going to have to fight Shin again, and then Ahsoka is going to have to fight Morak again. So the battle starts. Sabine actually starts it by firing off her blasters, and of course they separate. So now Shin is going to fight Sabine, and Morak is going to fight Ahsoka. So they split up. Sabine chases Morak, and Ahsoka and Morak actually do things a little bit differently. Instead of, basically jumping into the fight like Shin and Sabine do, Ahsoka and Morak kind of like slowly begin the fight, right? Morak ignites his Inquisitor lightsaber. Ahsoka ignites hers, and of course she does the classic backhand hold of the lightsaber like this. That's something in the Clone Wars that she did like crazy, and it just is great to see her using the lightsaber in this way. But they start to fight. They're rotating, and Morak makes the first strike, and they're dueling back and forth, and Ahsoka is just managing to basically dodge Morak like crazy, right? But then we cut back to Sabine and Shin going at it, still with the blaster in her hand. Because remember, Sabine would rather use a blaster than a lightsaber at this point in time, right? But Shin manages to disarm her and force throw her against a wall, right? Now, if you guys don't know, there is something that a lot of Force users have, which is called a Force barrier, right? What that does is it blocks out Force abilities depending on how strong it is, right? Now, it doesn't mean that the Jedi or the Sith can get Force abilities used on them infinitely, or like not at all, right? But it does mean that they have a better chance of withstanding them. So the fact that Shin is able to just throw Sabine against the wall kind of just shows that her Force barrier is garbage. Okay? And we know that she's going to learn how to use the Force at some point, but it is still just a detail that I figured I'd point out. But Sabine is disarmed, and then Shin goes for the strike, and then she does this insane dodge. I have to say, she basically throws herself on the floor intentionally in order to dodge this lightsaber attack, which, by the way, would have definitely killed her. I don't know if it would have went through her armor, but if it was just her head that she was aiming for, it would have killed her, right? It 100%. It cut through the tree, it would have killed her, right? But then she finally pulls out the green lightsaber, and they actually have a lightsaber duel. But then we cut back to Ahsoka and Morak actually dueling it out, right? And they're going at it, okay? Ahsoka is going back and forth with Morak, and I don't know if she's actually getting like angry at Morak here, but it's definitely she's definitely not having the easiest time fighting him. Okay, obviously it's not the hardest, but it's not the easiest either. But then we cut back to Balon and Morgan with the star map. They are talking about how the star map is close to calculating, and it actually calculates by using these rings, right? So there's, I believe there's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 1, 2, 3, 5, 1, 2, 3, 4. There's 9 rings, right? And each time a ring calculates a part of the coordinates, it lights up yellow, right? And it's just full of suspense because it's like, man, they have to get there now because if they calculate this coordinates, it's over, right? So Ahsoka and Morak are still fighting, right? And Ahsoka basically gets away from Morak for a little bit. They're kind of in a pause position right now, and then Ahsoka actually raises the lightsaber over her head, right? Basically, almost ready to duel, right? And it's kind of weird because normally putting your lightsaber over your head like this means you're going to go for something like a powerful move, right? I don't know if that's necessarily true or not, but that's what I would assume, right? But she holds the lightsaber over her head, and Morak Morak turns on his lightsaber and it's spinning. But before we see what happens with that, we cut back to Shin and Sabine. They're going at it with the lightsabers. Sabine's actually holding her own this time, which is interesting to see. And you can actually see something really, really cool if you guys have watched the series or if you guys have watched the episode and you see the parts where they clash, right? Their lightsabers are actually kind of emitting this kind of like steam, which is what a lightsaber actually does if you guys don't know, right? It just depends if it's like clashing or not, right? So that's kind of how the lightsabers have the after image when they're like swinging because of the steam, right? I don't know if it's necessarily steam actually. I just thought about it. I don't know if it's necessarily steam, but whatever it is, it's some kind of particles that are flying off of their lightsabers, right? Or some kind of like smoke, right? But they continue the duel, right? And they're going at it. Shin is just going full anger mode on Sabine, and it actually is kind of crazy to see it, right? But before we finish that fight, we cut back to Ahsoka once again. Morak basically increasing the speed of his lightsaber, spinning. Ahsoka holding the lightsaber over her head, right? Her own, that's of course her own, right? And you think that Morak's about to do something crazy, but Ahsoka actually does it. And she perfectly times the spinning lightsaber and slices Morak in half. I gotta say, that is impressive. That is really, really impressive, okay? Because if you guys know how an Inquisitor's lightsaber spins, an Inquisitor's lightsaber spins so fast that can be used kind of like a helicopter, okay? So the fact that Ahsoka managed to spin his like Morak spinning his lightsaber so fast, right? And Ahsoka manages to slice through it at the perfect timing is just incredible. I mean, we really do underestimate Ahsoka. I feel like Ahsoka is one of the strongest Jedi that we've ever seen. And I'm not saying that because she was taught by Anakin Skywalker, right? I'm saying that because it might be true, but I just figured I'd point that out because that is an impressive feat. I have to say. And on top of that, guys, what happens when Ahsoka slices the body in half? We find out that it is not a person. A lot of people speculated that this Inquisitor could have been like Barriss Offee, right, who had previous ties to Ahsoka in the Clone Wars and framing her for the Jedi bombing, or the Jedi Temple bombing, right? But it was not. It was dark magic. It was witch magic, which is insane, right? Of course, we can see Shin and Sabine clashing in the background because remember, they're not too far themselves, right? But we see Morak get sliced in half and just combust into this smoke, right? And Shin and Sabine see that. They're because of course they're in the background, right? And they realize he just poofs into smoke, and they're like, "What the beep?" But they're like, they both like kind of stop in like a clash just to look at what happened. But then of course they resume the fight after, right? They both kind of freeze, look at Ahsoka, and they're like, "What was that?" And then of course Sabine interrupts it, and she's like, "Get the map," right? And he's like, "I'll take care of Shin," right? So Ahsoka runs after the map, but instead of continuing the fight, Shin actually hold up, wait. Never mind. They fight for a little bit more after. Just remember that. They fight a little bit more, right? So Ahsoka runs off. Shin's like, let's duel, let's finish this, right? But then we cut back to Morgan seeing the progress on the map, right? And she basically tells Bylon, I will prepare for our departure. I'm going up, I'm getting ready to make sure that we are prepared as soon as we have it, right? And she says, protect the map until I send for you, right? And if you guys, I just can't help the feeling that, like, it feels like you'd see that kind of mission in Battlefront 2. Okay, I don't know if you guys have ever played Battlefront 2, but it's like, oh, protect this and survive until the extraction. It just, I don't know, it just brings those vibes to me, right? But she tells us to Bylon, she departs, and then of course, Ahsoka gets to the outpost and finds the star field, or the star map. Technically, that's creating a star field barrier, right? But she finds the star map, right? And initially, she never spots Bylon, but then she sees him sitting on a rock, kind of menacingly, actually, as well. But then they begin talking to each other. Bylon says, Anakin spoke very highly of you. And he's very interested in that fact because not many people compared up to Anakin, right? But Ahsoka actually says something back, and she says he never mentioned you. So did Anakin have contact with Bylon at some point? That might have been something to think about. Maybe Bylon knows Anakin, or like has known Anakin. Well, and even that, even though I'm saying that, right? I think he could have a past because he actually does in the next line say everyone knows Anakin Skywalker in the Jedi Order, and only fewer people saw what he became, right? But basically, I'm not referring to that line. I'm referring to, does Violet have a past with Anakin, right, or something, right? Of course, we don't know for sure, but figured I'd point that out as well because, like he said, very few people knew, like, a lot of people knew Anakin Skywalker, but they never saw what he became because, slicey, dicey, order 6060. So, yeah. But Bylon talks to Ahsoka about this, and Bylon says that surely Anakin becoming Vader leaves a mark, right? And how you abandoned him. And of course, he's referencing the events of the Jedi Temple bombing when Ahsoka leaves Anakin and leaves the Jedi Order because she feels regret. But then she tells Balon that she's not here to discuss her past, right? And it's kind of weird because Ahsoka's knows what happened to Anakin. She regrets it, but she doesn't really like talking about it. She doesn't really like, oh, I know what I did. I know my mistakes. She hasn't really admitted to it, right? And that's going to be a key factor in episode 5, which I'll talk about later. But Ahsoka and Balin get ready to duel. And right before they duel, he mentions to Ahsoka that he wants something a lot greater, right? That he wants to do something a lot greater. And he's saying that he's not fully dark. Well, I mean, it's kind of showing that he's not fully dark. He doesn't say anything. But it's kind of showing that he's not fully dark, but he's definitely not fully light either. And that's why they have the orange lightsaber, by the way, if that's why you were wondering. But then Bylon says something insanely menacing, right? Because Ahsoka's like, you know what you're doing, right? You know that if you do this, Thrawn's gonna come back, right? But he's like, yeah, sure, Thrawn may come back, and he may start a war. But he says, unfortunately, the only way to create a better and new galaxy where, you know, where they're able to kind of live in a more conditional way, says it has the old one has to be destroyed in order to live in a new one, right? And that's what he sees in Thrawn. That's the only reason he really agrees with Thrawn's actions, right? And that's explored more in episode 6. We're going to get into that later. But we see Bylon and Ahsoka light up, basically activate their lightsabers, and you know the duel is about to begin. And as you guys notice, Ahsoka is only using one lightsaber. And there's a reason for this, right? Instead of igniting two, like she did with the droids, right? She's only using one. And she did this with Morak too. But she's only using one lightsaber here because she knew that Morak and Bylon were more strong, like not really strong opponents, but more like aggressive based opponents, like firm, strong, single bladed attacks, right? And even though Morak had an Inquisitor lightsaber that can spin, right? He really only went with one blade strikes, right? Kind of used it like a spear. So he kind of went like swapping back and forth between the edges. And he never really used that as like, oh my god, a double, like kind of like swift movements. He went strong movements, like Bylon will eventually do with his one lightsaber, right? And that's why she uses one here, because she's able to block more with that one instead of going with the fast attacks on the two, right? It just gives her more control over the situation, essentially. And that being said, they go around each other like Ahsoka has done for the others, or the other duels she's been a part of. And they go at it. They clash 3 times. And remember, Bylon's got that strong hit, so he's knocking Ahsoka back a little bit, right? But then they reset at the same position. And they do this constantly. They'll swing 4 or like 5 times and then they'll reset, right? And it is just making this kind of like really cool sequence battle, right? Ahsoka dodges one. She jumps on a rock, swings at Balin's head, misses by like an inch, by the way. So she jumps off the rock, misses Bylon's head by like, and we're talking like an inch, guys. Okay, she misses by an inch, and basically they're going hard at it now. Ahsoka's using very heavy movements. She's going pretty quick as well, but she's got to remember to do these heavy movements to keep up with Bylon, and they are clashing hard, right? And Ahsoka actually manages to kind of hold Bylon off, right? But mid duel, the scene cuts, and we see Morgan Elsbeth on the ship with only 3 of the orbs, or basically 4 of the orbs, left to highlight before they get their location. And the droid says that Bylon engaged with one of the Jedi, right? And They are, and he's like, he's at hinge, right? And of course, Morgan doesn't care about that. She's like, how long until we get the coordinates? And the droid says moments. And that's exactly when we cut back to the fight. Ahsoka swinging heavy at Balon once again. You can see this anger in her strikes. But then, out of nowhere, Balon throws a rock at Ahsoka, and she manages to split it with her lightsaber there, which I find really interesting because this entire fight, he doesn't really use the Force. But then when he realizes, he's like, okay, I got to get a hit in here. He uses the rock, tries to get a strike, but it doesn't work. Then they go back at it. Ahsoka switches her hand, like her lightsaber positioning, right? Instead of it being like this, like with a straight, like sword, like normal, she swaps it with her backhand, like this, kind of like a straight, like that. And she's actually dodging Balon pretty well because remember, Balon is not really about speed, more about strength, right? So she's able to do some quick movements to get away, including a cartwheel, which is really cool. And she's actually kind of sprinting towards the star map, and it's showing how she's prioritizing. Okay, we cannot let them get these coordinates, right? And Balon's trying to stop her. Balon's trying to get in the way, and she's like, "No, let's not do that." So she finally manages to get close enough to the star map, get Balon far enough away where she can just barely grab it at some point, right? But before that happens, she actually gets thrown up against the wall, and we cut to Sabine and Shin fighting, right? And Sabine's kind of handling her own against Shin, like I said before, right? She does kind of drop her lightsaber because Shin manages to get it out of her hand, right? But Sabine actually fake uses the Force here. It's a really, really good tactic. She holds up her hand like she's trying to use the Force. Shin's like, yeah, you know you don't have the Force, right? He's like, that was a pathetic attempt. But then Sabine switches to her, like, basically heavy blaster, like her heavy arm blast, right? Kind of look like whistling birds, but they're a lot heavier and stronger. And she actually manages to get Sabine's lightsaber out of her hand, right? And then, of course, we got back to Ahsoka and Balon dueling it out. And he says, your legacy, just like your master's, is one of death and destruction. And Ahsoka basically just goes aggro on him. She's like, yeah, I know, but I'm going to kill you first. And then, as I had mentioned previously, she does manage to get her hands on the star map and disables the, like, kind of like coordinate finding process, right? But when she does, she realizes the star map is actually really, really hot, like because of the magic, and she actually gets burned on one hand, right? I'm assuming she didn't expect it to be that hot, right? But she gets burned. And then we cut back to Sabine, right? Who is basically has Shin at gunpoint, right? With her like blasters, her heavy blasters. But Shin runs away with a smoke, basically a smoke bomb, and she gets away from Sabine. That's important to keep in mind, though, right? And I don't know how she had smoke bombs on her, but I guess that's cool. And it does honestly make her getaway menacing, like just full like ninja mode. But anyway, we cut back to Morgan, and Morgan's like, "What happened? The transmission of the coordinates has ceased at the source. The final calculation is incomplete," and that's what the droid says to her, because of course Ahsoka managed to get it, right? And that costed her basically her hand because her hand is now just burned, right? And Balon says that that was unwise, right? And why does he say that? Well, Ahsoka, remember, is using this dual stance here with one lightsaber. She's got to have two hands on her lightsaber to withstand Balon's heavy attacks and to make sure she's always got a grip on her lightsaber. But if your hand is burned, that's going to be a lot harder to grab. And that's why she, again, goes at Balon, or Balon goes at her, but she's only able to have one hand on her lightsaber, right? And that really puts her at a disadvantage because Balon is just able to push her back further and further. But then something else happens. Shin manages to get back to the outpost, right? And Ahsoka sees this at mid fight, right? And Ahsoka's like, "Where's Sabine?" Ahsoka's and Shin just walks up. Remember, she ditched Sabine, so Ahsoka assumes that she killed her, right? And in doing this, right, Ahsoka basically goes full Anakin mode here, right? Because remember, she is the apprentice of Anakin, and she basically force chokes Sabine and throws her, basically putting her unconscious, right? And Balon's like, "What was that?" And he's like, "Never mind, let's go," right? But it's just insane. It goes to show you how she basically still has Anakin's training a part of her, and even though she is a Jedi or was trained by a Jedi, it was Anakin Skywalker. It's really, really evident, right? But we see Ahsoka and Balon going at it again, and Balon basically pins her so heavily that she has to use the force on her lightsaber to hold it in place, right? Because she is basically forced right on the water, like the edge of the cliff before the water, right? So Balon says it didn't need to come to this, but there was no other way. And as that happens, Sabine shows up, right? Ahsoka's like, she lived, and Sabine's like, okay, I'm gonna re-talk the whole thing because I kind of just had a seizure there, right? But Sabine, right? Sabine shows up when Bylon has Ahsoka on the edge, right before the cliff, and Ahsoka's like, Sabine, destroy that thing, because Sabine has the star map at this point. So she's like, Sabine, destroy that star map, like now, right? So Sabine holds her gun up to the star map, right? And she's like, step away from her, or else you're like, I'm basically destroying your only chance of getting the throne, right? But Bylon actually does something really, really like kind of insane because Sabine basically has Bylon at gunpoint, but instead he ignores her and basically hits Ahsoka right with like an basically an undercut, right? Destroys her like ability to block, right, and just basically throws her off the edge. And Sabine's like, "Oh God, he won!" Right? And Sabine tries to shoot him with her blaster, and of course that doesn't work, right? Because he's able to deflect it, and then Sabine once again shoots the or tries to shoot the orb, right? And in this quick shot, Bylon just basically stops moving, and he closes his eyes, right? And he says, "You should do what your master says. Destroy it," right? He says that she would have done it, but you're not like her though. And she says, and Sabine responds with more than you know, right? Once again, being a theme between Master and Padawan, that they have a part of each other within them, right? So we see Bylon using some kind of force mind read ability, right? And I know it does have a name, guys, and I will have the name up in a YouTube short on this channel. So keep that in mind. I don't really memorize the name now, but basically he reads her mind using the force, and then he does it in like 2 seconds, and like basically a 2 second span. He reads her mind, and he's like, I know what you're looking for. You're looking for Ezra because he's the only family you have left, right? And she's like, oh no. Right, basically you can know, like she doesn't say that, but you know, it's just the expression, right? And she says, you don't know what you're talking about, trying to deny it once again, right? And Bylon says, I know it's holding you back, right? Because he now knows now because of that forced mind read. And he says, your family died on Mandalore because your master didn't, because your family died on Mandalore, right? And he says that your master didn't trust you, right? And all of which is kind of true. Ahsoka didn't trust Sabine to make the right decision, right? And he says that you and I share a common goal. Of course, he's referring to himself and Sabine. And he says to make this journey, you to be united with your long lost friend, and I to serve a greater good, That is a line, man. That is a line. And basically, he just says, "Come with me willingly, and I promise you will see your friend." Right? And doing this, Sabine gives up the star map. That is like the last thing we needed. That is like, right? She gives up the star map, and directly after she does that, Shin's like, "I'm gonna like force choke you to death," right? So she starts force choking her, and Bylon's like, "No, release her now," right? And Shin's like, "Fine, I'll do it," right? And he said, "All," and he says another cold, cold line. He's like, "I gave her my word, and unlike her former master, I intend to keep mine." Another just insane line, right? But then Bylon puts the star map back on the device. They get the coordinates, and it's just not good, right? Because Morgan now knows the exact location of Thrawn's ship. But we cut back to Hu Yang contacting Hera. Hera says, "Fulcrum, do you copy?" Hu Yang is like, "Yes, please send assistance at Cetos, please now," right? And he says the enemy has built a massive hyperspace ring. And he says, "Do not let them get away," right? And he also mentions that Ahsoka and Sabine want to go stop it, right? Because they want to make sure that this thing cannot get out of their sights. And Hera knows that there is a starship in the sky because of her scanners. And I think Carson does notice this too, right? But Morgan contacts Balin saying the coordinates are complete, get ready, right? And then Bylon ignites his lightsaber, destroying the star map, saying no one must follow us. That is insanity. That was the only thing to get to Ezra, and now it's gone. That's crazy. Sabine's like, "Well, now I have no choice, right?" And of course, Sabine just gave up, right? She basically gave in to Bylon, and instead of destroying the device, she gave in to Bylon, and now they're going to get Thrawn, right? They go up into the shuttle, right? They get on the ship. Well, they go into the shuttle, they get up on the ship, and basically, Hera and her X Squadron finds the ship, or finds the hyperspace ring, and they're like, "We need to stop this now," right? And the X-Wings are getting into, or like setting themselves into fighter mode, right? But as soon as Balon, Shin, and Sabine get there, they're like, "Yeah, we're leaving now," right? So they activate the hyperspace engines. They're pulsating, and even though Hera and her fleet are right in front of them, they're still jumping. Okay, and normally when you're going into hyperspace, you don't want to be stuck somewhere where the enemy fighters can shoot you, right? But they're risking it all, and they're just like, "We're jumping now." And this is unexpected because Hera doesn't expect this to happen. And as soon as it does, the hyperring goes, like, basically all the starships, right, are caught in the hyperring's like hyper jump, and they just all get disoriented. Like all the ships, right, basically get disoriented. Two of them actually crash right into each other, and just as that happens, Sabine, Carson, and the other star, or not Sabine, Hera, Carson, and the other starfighters regain their balance, and they realize, "Oh God, this thing just hyper jumped to Narnia." Okay, and when that happens, Jason says the iconic line, "I got a bad feeling about this." You should. So Hera meets up with Hu Yang, right? Hera meets up with Hugh Yang, right? Well, you don't see that in this episode, right? But Hugh Yang is like, hopefully they got my message, right? He leaves the ship. He's like checking to make sure that they're there, right? But as he's doing that, we cut back to the ocean where Ahsoka is supposedly dead. But of course, you know she's not. And it turns out that she fell into the ocean, but she fell into the world between worlds, right? Of course, a callback to Rebels. And in the background, we hear Hello Snips, of course, being the iconic line from Anakin Skywalker. Anakin finally makes his appearance in this series in the world between worlds. Not a better alternative, and the episode finishes. Dude, I gotta say, man, the Ahsoka series is fantastic. Okay, it's episode 4 set up episode 5 of the series perfectly, and I can't wait to break it down for you guys. Okay, but man, it just goes to show you, man. Not only did we get the world between worlds, but we got Anakin in it too, which is just incredible. But that is going to be the end of the episode for now, guys, or end of the breakdown for now. Hope you guys have enjoyed. Don't worry, guys, more content is coming soon. Remember that YouTube short is going to be coming out on the powers that Balon used on Sabine, and definitely breaking down the next episodes of Ahsoka because, man, it is such a good series. Okay, it is an incredible one of the best Star Wars ones up to date, and yeah. On top of that, more Halloween based content coming soon. We got Five Nights at Freddy's, making videos on that as well, like I said in the beginning. But for now, hope you guys have enjoyed this video, and I will see you all in the next breakdown.